Join me as I dive into Florida's deadliest dive spot and see if I can make it out in one piece. In Florida, you may find the Eagle's Nest sinkhole. Just looking at it from the surface, the tiny pond is algae-filled and uninteresting. This perspective, however, is misleading. A 6-foot-wide vertical tunnel leads from the base of this little pond to a huge pitch-black cavern space that's as big as an aircraft hangar, and it is only the start. These incidents illustrate why Eagle's Nest Cave is among the most perilous places to scuba dive in the world. Viewers are cautioned to use their own judgment. The Chassahowitzka Wildlife Management Area is located around 24,000 acres of wooded wetlands and sandhills, and it may be reached by driving only an hour north of Tampa, Florida. The Florida black bear and other endangered snake species call this region home. But that's not all the unusual wildlife you'll find there. A little body of water that, from above, seems a nearly perfect circle is smack dab in the center of this enormous reserve. However, at sea level, it seems as plain and uninviting as can be imagined. Mosquitoes and ticks make even a short foray onto the boardwalk leading to the lake enough to put most people off. And if you didn't know better, you would think the algae-filled pool was a paradise for alligators. One of the several sinkholes in Florida, Eagle's Nest, is the result of erosion that has taken place over many millions of years. Standing on its banks, the pond may seem ordinary, but to those with the right perspective, it offers a world of wonder and adventure. Because of this, many individuals from all over the globe go there each year. Reason being, Eagle's Nest is very remarkable due to its hidden treasures. It's trite to say this. You've certainly heard the term used to describe other caves, but Eagle's Nest is considered one of the pinnacles of cave diving. Its renown is well-deserved, much as that of Mount Everest. After you go down the first 20 feet, or 6 meters, the pool looks just like any other fountain. However, the pool floor shapes into a basin, with what seems to be a big drain in the middle at around 20 feet. The truth is that divers are almost whisked away to another planet via a 6-foot-wide or 2-meter-wide vertical tube. There is vast, pitch-black emptiness at the end of the little tube. The reason for this is because the ballroom is where the tunnel terminates. The dimensions of this space are comparable to those of an aircraft hangar, and cave divers who have been to the ballroom have described it as being like floating through space or another planet. Several tunnels lead off a sloping rubble pile at the base of this enormous cavern, as if that weren't astonishing enough. 2 tunnels go to the downstream side, while one leads to the upstream side, but they're in for a rude awakening before they can make that decision. A sign was put up to bring divers down to earth when they became too engrossed in all the sights within Eagle's Nest. Stop, prevent your own death, go no farther. Beneath this eye-catching warning, you'll find several statistics concerning how dangerous Eagle's Nest may be. The sign features an illustration of a grim reaper standing over multiple dead divers. That includes professional cave divers with years of expertise, dive masters with extensive experience in deep caverns, certification in the gas mixture trimix, and complete certification in cave diving are required to access Eagle's Nest. Even if you fulfill all of those requirements, you should still only dive Eagle's Nest with a dive master on your first dive. The warning concludes with the words, "There's nothing in this cave worth dying for." With that out of the way, what is it about Eagle's Nest that makes it both a very risky dive and an outstanding enough attraction that people keep going back for more? Although it isn't the deepest cave the channel has ever crossed, at 310 feet, 95 meters, it is certainly one of the most difficult. 13 individuals have died within caves since 1981. That may not seem like a lot, but when you consider that 161 Americans died while cave diving between 1985 and 2015, a span of 30 years, you can realize how little the problem is. Although the 2 time periods in question may not coincide exactly, 8% of the fatalities would still be attributable to Eagle's Nest. Even though there are hundreds of caverns to dive in the United States, 1 out of every 11 cave fatalities in the country happened in the Eagle's Nest system. For instance, Darren took his son Dylan diving at the Eagle's Nest on Christmas Day 2013. The new air tanks were a Christmas present, and the father and son couldn't wait to put them to the test. Dylan, who was only 15 years old, did not meet the standards in contrast to Darren, who was completely trained and had experience. Their dive strategy remains a mystery, although the dive computers worn by each diver indicate that they reach depths of up to 233 feet, 71 meters. In order to prevent nitrogen narcosis, Most divers would change gas halfway down the dive at this depth. On the other hand, it seems that the father and son didn't, and it's believed that the constant exposure to air under the tremendous pressure made them more drunk as they dropped. Because of this, they started to lose track of time, and, ultimately, they dropped so low in the air that they couldn't return to the surface. The father and son probably freaked out when they realized they wouldn't have enough oxygen to return, which led Dylan to quickly deplete his tanks. After they ran dry, Dylan attached a second regulator to a lengthy line on his father's tanks. However, because they were already breathing from the same supply, this made matters worse. It is said that Darren became unconscious as the air pressure dropped, and when Dylan realized the tanks were empty, he spat out the regulator and desperately attempted to surface on a breath hold. Sadly, however, they were both killed in the crash. Dylan was discovered floating near a spare set of tanks they had secreted on the way down, while Darren's corpse was eventually discovered on the rubble pile at the bottom of the ballroom. Something similar has occurred here before, too. It was really a comparable episode that marked the first documented catastrophe at Eagle's Nest. Terry, then 29 years old, and Larry, then 30 years old, visited the sinkhole in December 1981. They were among 4 divers who were within one of the tunnels at the time. Terry had clutched onto Larry's leg as they were traveling through a tunnel, but she abruptly let go. The pair had done this dive without problem previously, but that day was different. Larry glanced over in the fraction of a second and saw Terry still in the water, her regulator dangling from her lips at her side. After that, he let go of her after futilely attempting to reinsert the regulator into her mouth. In the end, he had to abandon his wife and return to the surface quickly, where he saw Jim Bentz, a guy photographing the surface pool. Fortunately, Jim happened to be a trained rescue diver and diving teacher, so after hearing about what was happening from Larry, he hurriedly put on his gear, retrieved a single tank of air, and dove into Eagle's Nest. But Jim disappeared as well. He was still drifting at a depth of around 250 feet, 76 meters, when rescuers eventually located him. Another cruel turn of events occurred when Jim's buddies informed the press that he was contemplating retiring from cave diving due to safety concerns. Despite being at a height of less than 200 feet, 61 meters, Terry was reportedly breathing normal air, similar to Darren and Dylan. Both Terry and Jim supposedly died after enduring crippling episodes of nitrogen narcosis. Another problem that might arise in Eagle's Nest, or any cave, as a result of these accidents is when divers try to do too much. Located atop the rubble pile is a placard that serves as a stark and serious warning on this specific threat. However, many scuba divers either don't care or think they're more experienced and capable than they really are. Said, a 20-year-old diver and a small group of other divers showed up at the parking lot outside Eagle's Nest on the evening of July 18, 2018, in relation to another event. But these divers were a little different. They were called free divers. Free divers, like scuba and cave divers, use fins, a wetsuit, and masks, but they do not need air tanks. Put simply, every dive is executed alone while holding one's breath. After they arrived, the divers would spend hours at the surface watching each other do their free dives, which often included reaching a target depth as fast as possible while using ballast or weights. They performed some quick exploration after they reached depth, and then they kicked their way back to the surface. As time drew near for Saeed's last dive, he resolved to surpass his previous best by ascending to an altitude of 80 feet, or 24 meters. As he and another diver dove beneath the water and plummeted into the ballroom's darkness, the remaining group stared in awe. It is unknown how long Saeed could maintain a steady breathing rate underwater, although, compared to cave divers who use tanks, amateur free divers often just need a few minutes to complete a dive. Regardless, it was immediately apparent that something was seriously wrong when Saeed failed to appear. Afterwards, a number of people from the group hurried inside Eagle's Nest in an attempt to find him and assist him, but he was not there. With just a breath hold, they were unable to go any farther into the ballroom's enormous depths. Others were also phoning for aid in an emergency while this was transpiring simultaneously. It did not take long for rescue divers to locate Saeed, however. His corpse was on top of the rubble pile around 150 feet, 46 meters below ground. It is unclear from the facts that he provided what went wrong during his dive. In fact, beyond that, lives are still being claimed by Eagle's Nest, even when almost all things go according to plan. One of four divers, Charles, 55 years old, showed up at Eagle's Nest early on January 8, 2017, to conduct some exploration. Prior to their descent, one of the divers in the party encountered an equipment issue and subsequently withdrew from the dive. Charles, along with the other two, had no prior cave diving expertise and had only been diving for 2 years. Nevertheless, they proceeded with their plan nevertheless. Without incident, the three of them made their way down into the ballroom via the vertical tube. Suddenly, at a height of around 100 feet, 33 meters, Charles became limp. He had apparently passed out by the time the other two got to him, so they hurried over to check on him. Initiating their climb right away, they had to tread carefully so they wouldn't suffer from decompression sickness. The diver who had to stay behind was packing his equipment into his vehicle when he heard the other divers splash and hurried to the pool to find out why they were so early. After that, he rescued Charles from the sea, but at that point, it was too late, regardless of what had happened to him. An autopsy confirmed that he had a heart attack while diving, and he was declared dead at the site when emergency medical personnel arrived. On a different note, on January 20th, 2018, pilot and spear fisherman Davin, 53 years old, arrived at Eagle's Nest with his trusted companion Greg. Because of their limited training, the two divers intended to limit themselves to a depth of around 70 feet, 21 meters, while exploring the ballroom. Just as they stepped inside the pitch-black ballroom, Davin also fell limp. Authorities believed that Davin had a heart attack while diving, but he passed away before emergency care services could reach him. Brent first visited Eagle's Nest in August of 1990 when he was 29 years old, long before Charles and Davin died there. He had just completed an introductory cave diving course and was a licensed dive instructor when he arrived at Eagle's Nest. What his dive buddies that day didn't know was that Brent had been having underwater blackouts for almost a year before that dive, which made him unskilled in caves overall and especially deep ones. There are many potential causes of blackouts while scuba diving, such as excessive breath holding, nitrogen narcosis, or oxygen poisoning. However, the specific explanation for Brent's pattern of unconsciousness remains unknown. Regardless, he became unconscious and plummeted to the floor of the ballroom at some point during his Eagle's Nest plunge. At some point, at the 60-meter, or 190-foot mark, his corpse was discovered. Now, another thing that makes Eagle's Nest risky is that it isn't exactly recognized for consistently having crystal-clear waters, unlike many of the neighboring springs in the region. The weather and the current on any one day determine everything. The water at Eagle's Nest is often somewhat hazy, but it may become murky and black from tannins, which are organic dyes, not to mention the constant risk of inadvertently obliterating the visibility by stirring up the silt around the cave walls. Cave divers would try to maintain their bodies as flat as possible and use maneuvers like the frog kick to prevent this, but it is still possible. Due to the growing popularity of cave diving and the small number of fatalities that happened at Eagle's Nest, prior to the new millennium, the wildlife refuge officially outlawed diving there in 1999. Since this was upsetting to the cave diving community, they wasted no time in trying to have Eagle's Nest reopened to them. Their 2003 campaign proved successful, as diving was permitted at the sinkhole again after much persuasion. Tragically, disaster happened once again on June 12, 2004, not quite a year after the first incident, when John, 36, and Craig, 44, eagerly stepped up for the chance to dive Eagle's Nest. Their support crew called 911 after the two divers failed to return by 3:30, despite initial expectations that they would return at about 2:30. John was discovered 1,000 feet, 305 meters, within one of the system's tunnels at about 3 p.m. the next day. He was still wearing all of his equipment, but he was devoid of gas and his main and secondary tanks. 2 more days would pass before Craig was located, fully entangled in a rope, around 290 feet, 88 meters, further into the cave. Supposedly, the two encountered a silt out during the dive, and John, in a fit of terror, threw off his scooter and seized the guideline. However, it is believed that John followed the line in the other direction of the exit, maybe because he was panicked or because there was no directional indication. This is a terrifying concept. He became completely bewildered as a result of this error and ultimately ran out of oxygen. Similarly, Craig probably messed up, but then he reached a spot where the line had a leap in it while following the rope. It seems that he became entangled in his own line while attempting to make the leap. At around the same time, he ran out of gas and perished near the site of his discovery. On October 16, 2016, Patrick, Chris, and Justin, all very experienced and qualified divers, planned a long dive at Eagle's Nest. The two most seasoned divers, Patrick and Chris, were leading the way, with Justin following to investigate the shallower areas as they dove deeper. The trio made sure to stow trimix, decompression, and bailout tanks along the guidelines the day before their dive. This allowed them to skip the pre-dive briefing and go straight to diving when they arrived on the 16th. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Justin was primarily responsible for diving to a certain depth and checking in with Patrick and Chris to make sure they were in the decompression phase of their dive. As you may already know, decompression is an essential component of cave diving, especially when you go to very deep levels like Eagle's Nest. The soft tissues of a diver's body absorb nitrogen gas as they descend, but as they ascend, the gas returns to their circulation and is ejected from their lungs during exhalation. The most important thing to remember is that this is a lengthy process that depends on how long and deep you stay below. And this is a crucial step because there are a lot of problems that might arise from nitrogen bubbles in the blood if the ascent is too rapid. Joint and muscular discomfort, headache, and weakness are moderate symptoms. Paralysis and death may result from more severe instances. Patrick, Chris, and Justin went down together that day about midday. When they reached Justin's maximum depth, they paused for a second, gave each other the OK signal, and then Patrick and Chris went on. After as scheduled, Justin returned to his maximum depth at 3 o'clock after investigating, but upon looking below, he could see that his dive companions were nowhere to be found. After returning to depth every half an hour to check on Patrick and Chris, Justin finally contacted the Cave Country Dive Shop to speak with a rescue diver at 6 o'clock when he still hadn't seen either of them. Next, a rescue diver hurried to Eagle's Nest, accompanied by the team's support divers. However, conditions were not favorable for conducting a search and rescue dive until around 11 that evening. Once within the ballroom of Eagle's Nest, two rescue divers alternated between exploring the upstream tunnels. They redirected their attention to the downstream tunnel after a thorough search of the upstream corridors yielded no results. They did not discover Patrick or Chris when they emerged at around 3:30 in the morning, however. From there, two other divers dove into one of the tunnels farther downstream, heading toward a place called the Pit. Upon reaching the other side of the hole, they discovered Patrick and Chris's dead corpses almost immediately. Here is what is thought to have transpired based on what was seen upon the corpses' discovery, including data from their individual dive computers. After around 43 minutes of diving, the two finally reached the pit. They lingered outside for a while before diving in, perhaps to figure out how to get around the tight confines. They went into the restricted area at around the 49-minute mark, but came out a few minutes later. They waited for another 58 minutes before trying again, but something odd happened 3 minutes after that. One of them subsequently removed their rebreather mask. A rebreather allows divers to prolong their dives and reduce the amount of bubbles they make by recycling exhaled gas into breathable gas. Both of their air tanks had their auxiliary long hoses deployed at some point, so they started breathing from the same tank. At the scene, it was evident that one of them became caught in the limitation, while the other tried to release him. Nevertheless, it is not clear whether one of them had a mechanical malfunction. Regrettably, the two guys lost gas approximately 85 minutes into the dive, even though they were close to a spare bottle of gas they had hidden the day before. Regrettably, they were unable to reach their designated decompression stations. Ultimately, what is known is that two seasoned divers were at a depth limit when an event happened that necessitated the removal of one diver's rebreather, even though it was still operating well. Attempting to traverse the limitation while buddy breathing, they eventually ran out of gas due to the combination of whatever they were dealing with and the narrow cave channels. Some have speculated that one guy became trapped while the other perished attempting to free him. You may have seen that a number of the occurrences that took place at Eagle's Nest weren't part of some wild, extreme technical dive. In general, the occurrences happened for reasons unrelated to the cave. However, there were a few, and likely more, that don't get much attention. Actually, there were a few instances when they were just random accidents. Just with the notorious blue hole of Dahab, there aren't enough data to say if Eagle's Nest is exceptionally hazardous or whether more people dive there, leading to a greater overall death toll. The cave diving community may still access Eagle's Nest sinkhole today, notwithstanding. I really appreciate you sticking around if you have reached this point. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you may find the audio-only version of these videos to listen to. Additionally, you may use the form that is provided in the description to submit any story suggestions you may have. In any case, I appreciate it once again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.